We're in the thick of the NBA season as the Celtics gear up soon for the playoffs. Joining us now is Mike Isenberg, and he has a new book coming out. It is called Banner Year: How Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Brad Stevens persevered to lead the Boston Celtics to an historic 18th title. He co-authored it with Cedric Maxwell, who of course you see on our station. And Mike, it's so great to have you a former intern of WBZ. Thanks for joining us. And there's a lot to talk about with this book, to look back at what was an historic year for the Celtics. I'll ask you this first. What was your favorite part about putting this all together?
Well, reliving the magic, obviously, of a championship. And we're spoiled as Bostonians. I'm from the area because we've won so many titles. But I think what made this title so different was the way that they went about doing it between drafting, Jayson Tatum, then going and getting Porzingis and getting Drew Holiday, just kind of reliving that and talking to some of the people that were involved with it about these moves where it's like you lost game 7 to the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals and you go get Porzingis 3 weeks later. I mean, that was, stuff like that was really cool, I think, to experience again.
Yeah, you mentioned the Eastern Conference Finals in Game 7 and the Celtics losing at home to the Miami Heat. When you talked to all the parts of this book, the main characters, what was it about that loss to the Heat that prompted such significant change in the offseason to trade for Kristaps Porzingis, to trade away Marcus Smart, and of course bring Drew Holiday into the fold?
Well, I think that obviously they were huge favorites. And, I think everyone firmly believes that if Jayson hadn't sprained his ankle in the first minute of the game, they would have won game 7. But they didn't. They lost. And they had lost in the finals the previous year to Golden State. And Brad Stevens really looked at the team and said, what do we need? And we need a low post presence. Robert Williams was a great defender, but, he's hurt all the time. And his offense was basically rim running and dunking. So I think that was the first step was, Brad said that he had a list. He has a list all the time of like 30 guys. And if these guys become available, we would be interested in them. And Porzingis had been on there. He was coming off a healthy year. And I think that with Marcus Smart, I think that, he was so vocal and he took up so much oxygen in the room as a team leader. Brad didn't say this, but I do believe that was part of it, was letting him go, and it allowed Jayson and Jaylen to grow as leaders. And so I think that first move was basically Brad saying we need something on offense that we don't have. And obviously Kristaps has proven to be a great 3-point shooter, but he's also 7'2". Like, you put him on the block, they're not stopping him. The Drew part of it, they weren't planning on that. No one knew that he was going to get traded. Brad told me that they were totally prepared to go into the season as was. But then Damian Lillard gets traded. Drew goes to Portland. Everyone knew he wasn't going to stay there. And, the Celtics knew they had to move quick because Miami, the Sixers, all these teams were going to go after him. And so they just put their best offer up right away, and they got it done, a couple of days before training camp.
Why did Brad Stevens never give up on the idea that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown could together lead the Celtics to an NBA title? Because I think in the years that preceded them winning a title, so many people here in Boston questioned that duo and if one should be maybe traded away to get in another piece.
Well, I think that, talking to him, and I spoke with Austin Ainge, who's the assistant general manager, they both said, we don't worry about Jayson and Jaylen. They're really good. They're winning players. I mean, Jaylen is a year older, so he is, he's been in more playoff games than several teams. So he said, and Brad said, a lot of people looked at it like, we're coming up short. It's hard to win. And they were in the Eastern Conference Finals every year, it seemed. So they strongly believed that. And I think that was one of the key things in the book, is that, like, the Chicago Bulls with Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, they were together for 3 years before they won a championship. Stockton and Malone obviously never won a championship, but they were together a long time. But most of these duos, even going back to like Walt Frazier and Willis Reed, they were together for 3 years and they won a title. So I think the fact that Brad in management looked at the Celtics as Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, These are two stars. They do everything right. We're sticking with them. They're winning players. To stick with them for 6 years was pretty remarkable. And I think that's one of the things that sets this one apart.
And what set this team apart as well is their head coach and a character. I think you listen to his quotes, and I think a lot of people enjoy them, especially in the winning context now with the Celtics having won a championship. But Joe Mazzulla got thrusted into this situation. Obviously, what happened with Ime Udoka and with them coming off a season in which they made the NBA Finals. You have a lot of good stories in this book about Joe Mazzulla. I'm gonna make a difficult decision here. What's your favorite one that gets told in this book?
Well, I think that one of the things about Joe that just oozes out of him is authenticity. Like, he's different. He's a different cat, but this is Joe. And there was one story where he started crying in front of Cedric Maxwell. I'm going to save that one so someone can read that in the book. But I love the fact that when he got hired as the head coach, an unprecedented situation, guy's never been a head coach and wasn't even a front row assistant coach. He went into the locker room and they're all sitting there. It's Jayson Tatum, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, everyone. And he said, "You guys are great NBA players. I am not a great NBA coach." Now think about the humility you have to do that. You're in a situation that no one anticipated with a marquee franchise like this, and you're telling the guys you're not a great NBA coach. And he said the reason he said that was because he hadn't been an NBA coach. So how could he know if he was a great coach? And I think that authenticity, and I talked to him about it, he said, if I didn't say that, if I just kind of tried to do business as usual, the guys would look at me. I mean, they knew who I was. I'd been around the team, but they'd say, does this guy think he has it all figured out? So I think that humility really sets him apart from a lot of coaches. I mean, I can't imagine, Pat Riley in the day standing in front of his team saying, "I'm not a great NBA coach." So I think the authenticity really resonates. And Bob Ryan said, he goes, I didn't know Joe Mazzulla. I knew who he was, but that was it. But the fact that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown came out so strongly in favor of Joe, I said, okay, then I'm good because they know him.
And I mentioned this at the top that you co-wrote this book with Cedric Maxwell, of course, the Celtics great, and is now the color commentator for the Celtics radio network on 98.5, the Sports Hub. What was that like for you? Because as you mentioned to us, you grew up in Massachusetts, and you also grew up a Cedric Maxwell fan as well.
Well, I grew up in Sudbury, and someone said to me when I was in junior high, they said, "You look like Cedric Maxwell." And I said, okay. And it's because I have long arms and long legs. So he's always been my guy. Even when I went to Emerson College, as you can see up there, I wore number 31 in honor of him. And so Max and I did a book a couple of years ago about his career on the court as a broadcaster and all that. And we really hit it off. I mean, he's such a great storyteller. And so when I wanted to do this book, I wanted to do it with somebody that was there. And Max, I mean, he is an open book, and he's got great stories. He's got great opinions. And so that was really just like, these last two books have been the most fun I've had is working with him.
And we've heard him a lot, through the Bird Magic documentaries, talk about that time period, when he was playing with the Celtics and those glory years with Larry Bird. So we know about his perspective, in that regard. And again, we hear him in Boston on a nightly basis when the Celtics do play. What was one of your favorite stories that you were able to get from him about this group specifically? Because he's watched the Jays grow up here in the NBA.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the documentary, because when I reached out to him on Twitter, and I met him a couple of times when he was doing games here, but I reached out to him on Twitter after I saw that 30 for 30 on ESPN, best of frenemies, the Lakers and the Celtics. And his stories were so fantastic. I said, we got to try to do a book here. So, my favorite Max story is he has such a good relationship with the players. Jayson Tatum and him go back to when Jayson came here, and Jayson didn't know anything about Max. And one day Max, the 30 for 30 was on ESPN, and the next day Jayson came in and he goes, Cornbread, you a bad MF. Because he realized, like, this guy was MVP in the finals in 1981, and he was great against the Lakers in 84. So that reverence that Jayson has towards him. So even, before every game, Max goes up to Jayson Tatum and says, "You're the baddest out here." And so after one of the games in the playoffs last year, Jayson went like this and pointed to him, and Max said that really gave him chills. So it's cool how a guy who's, older, Max, he's almost 70 years old, relates to these 25-year-old kids.
That is a great story. Final thing I have for you, Mike, just to bring it to present day. And again, you're following this team through this season as they try to repeat for the first time in Celtics history since the Bill Russell days. What do you think of this year's group? And what do you think of their chances to repeat this year?
Well, it's funny because when they won their last title with Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen, the next year they started off 28-2. And then shortly thereafter, Garnett got hurt and they never won another championship. I didn't expect them to come out of the gate strong this year because Drew, Derek White, and Jayson had all played in the Olympics. They also played into June in the finals. That's a lot of basketball. But, they started off great this year, 19-2, I think. Then, or 19-4. And then they hit the skids a little bit and they've been a little bit inconsistent. But I think the last couple of weeks they've started to put it together. And this is kind of what I expected. A veteran team, don't forget they started without Porzingis. So he's rounding into shape. And this All-Star break, I think, will do well. And I think that they're going to have a really good second half of the year. And it's funny because they're so good on the road and so maddening at home. Maybe it's a good thing that they're not going to catch Cleveland for the best record in the East, so they won't have home court advantage. These guys are tried and true. They've been there, and I think as long as they can stay healthy, I think they're the team to beat.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. The only team that I think can give them a shot right now, and again, hopefully we're not jinxing that, is one led by an Emerson guy like yourself and Sam Presti, who's the GM of the Oklahoma City Thunder. They've had a good season in the West, but we'll see if the Celtics can repeat and do it. In the meantime, you can grab a new book coming up from Mike as we've been talking about. The title one more time. It's called Banner Year, How Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Brad Stevens persevered to lead the Boston Celtics to an historic 18th title, co-authored alongside Cedric Maxwell. Mike, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.